minister dies and is waiting in line at the pearly gates. Ahead of him is a guy who's all dressed in sunglasses and a loud Hawaiian shirt, a leather jacket, and jeans. St. Peter asked the man wearing the sloppy clothes, "Who are you, that I may know whether or not to admit you to the kingdom of heaven?" The guy replies, "I'm Steve Chauvin Jr., taxi driver in New Orleans." St. Peter consults his list, smiles, and says, "Take this silk robe and this golden staff and enter the kingdom of heaven." St. Peter consults his list, smiles, and says, "It's the next person's turn." The minister comes up. He stands up tall and booms out, "I am Reverend Joseph Snow, pastor of St. Mary's Church for the last 43 years in New Orleans." St. Peter consults his list and he says to the minister, "Oh, take this cotton robe and this wooden staff and enter the kingdom of heaven." "Just a minute," says the minister. "That man before me was a cab driver and he gets a silken robe and a golden staff? How can this be?" St. Peter looks up at the preacher and says, "Up here we work by results. While you preached, people slept. While Steve drove his car, everyone prayed." Good morning. I hope I can keep you awake today because we are in the most important time of the spiritual year. We have celebrated the birth of Christ consciousness in us at Christmas. During the burning bowl ceremony last week for New Year's, we released all that was not serving our highest good, and we committed to that which is serving us. So, where do we go from here? That Christ that we birth has to be raised now. But like all new babies, it did not come with instructions, Newborns need a lot of care and attention to grow and to thrive and to realize their full potential. Just as beautiful flowers need sunlight and the right soil and occasional pruning, and our protection during the storms of life, our spiritual life too needs our undivided attention to reach its full potential. We have to work at it. Child rearing would be simple if it just took an hour on Sunday or maybe 20 minutes a day. But if that's all we put into developing our spiritual life, the results will be very disappointing, maybe even disastrous from a spiritual point of view. Living a spiritual life is a full-time job. Like child rearing, it becomes a way of life. Someone once said that there are 3 kinds of spiritual people. The first are rowboat people. They row with all their strength, and they use their oars to row, usually upstream. They make some progress, but it's difficult going against the currents of life's eternal wisdom. Often they get worn out. The current's too great and they just quit, often making a mess of things before they do. Second, there's sailboat people. Given the right winds, their sails are full and ready to travel for God. Sometimes everything out there is just wonderful, but when the wind stops blowing, the boat stops sailing and begins drifting just to any old place. These people often get depressed and they wonder why things aren't working for them. Then a new wind blows in the right direction and they're off again. But sailboat people are totally dependent on outer circumstances for their happiness. Then there are steamboat people. The steamboat people don't care about the currents of life or the wind. Steamboats are powered by the fire and the water that turns in their great propellers, and they move the steamboat in its direction, regardless of the outer conditions. This is like when we allow God to be the center of our lives and take control. We go with the real flow of life, the divine order of things, and we maintain our inner God power and peace, no matter what is going on out there, what the wind is like, what the current is like. Well, how do we do that? That's the big question, right? How do we become steamboat spiritual people? Well, we work on raising our inner Christ child that we have birthed at Christmas. We make a good home for it, we tend to it constantly, and we work on being a good role model for it. This isn't always easy. We all know that. Making a spiritual commitment in today's Western world is often going against the current of what Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore called race consciousness, or what we call programming. The prevailing conditioning out there in life often teaches self-centered, ego-oriented, and materialistic values. For example, our culture is pervaded with advertising aimed at telling us what we need to buy, to be, and to do to be happy. We need more stuff, more experiences, more perfect bodies. Ads make us feel imperfect, incomplete, and unlovable, so we'll buy their products. They don't tell men about the mechanics of that beautiful red sports car. They show a beautiful trophy girl there gazing at it, so the guy will unconsciously feel like he'll get her when he buys the car, right? And the women have to buy designer clothes, French perfume, and membership to the latest exercise club to look like that trophy girl. The ad psychologists never bother to tell you that all that fancy makeup and sports cars and stuff in the world can't fill our inner void. Only God can. And by God, I mean the eternal wisdom, the higher values of life, love, compassion. So where do we find help in this world and raising our inner Christ child so that we can access those things that truly fulfill us? The kind of wisdom we need for this kind of child rearing is not found in pop culture, in Manhattan Street hype ads, or even at the office coffee breaks. Worldly solutions about how we can live sometimes offer a quick fix to our temporary problems, but they aren't permanent solutions or the guidance we need for true, real, long-lasting inner peace and joy and abundance. They are rowboat answers that help us negotiate rowing against the currents of life. But when we change our thinking and our actions, we can become steamboat sailors in life, and we don't need any external quick fixes. We are powered by something greater than we can access anywhere else. In fact, we don't even feel the insecurities, fears, and negativity that make people crave material stuff, substances, and time fillers when we are truly fulfilled by the important values of life. Steamboat spirituality doesn't row upstream, and it isn't dependent on outer circumstances to be happy and fulfilled. Letting God's wisdom and power direct our lives may take some effort and attention at first, but it makes life so much easier and better in the long run. So exactly how do we create these conditions wherein this inner Christ that we have birthed can reach its full steamboat power? How do we do that? Well, first, we have to have right aim. You can't get somewhere if you don't know where you're going. You have to type in your destination on any GPS if you expect to get any results, right? Spiritually evolving people are headed to the higher levels of life, to realms where love and happiness and peace abound. They're normal. When life inserts its lower values on our path, things like judgment, unforgiveness, negativity, or self-centeredness, for example, we must remember to aim higher than the world's values. Right aim is heading toward our highest evolutionary potential. It's a state where you feel compassion toward, a unity with, and gratitude for all of life. And you desire to share that with others. And that doesn't preclude making positive changes in the world. It probably makes those efforts more effective and easier. Secondly, we must put forth right effort. For example, we must expose our little inner Christ consciousness that we have birthed to what is good for it and its unfoldment. Even the seed of a beautiful rose can be thwarted from unfolding into its natural state if it's deprived of water, sunlight, proper soil. In order for our Christ consciousness to fully bloom, we must make the effort to provide it with a healthy environment. A steady diet of negativity, toxic people, films, and reading material will not help a child blossom. And for maximum results, we must provide our young Christ child with a good role model. We must live sincere, loving, compassionate, forgiving lives. Thirdly, we must have right view. We must appreciate what is truly good and fine and honest and sincere in life. We must be discerning enough to distinguish between the eternal wisdom and the lower, more superficial values that are so prevalent in our world. As one of my favorite authors, Saint-Exupéry, said in The Little Prince, "The essential is invisible to the eyes. We only see well with our hearts." Right view is knowing what is important in life, even if it's not physically visible. Next, we must have right concentration. If we don't stay present to what we're doing and thinking 24/7, we can forget where we're going and we can just float off into some mechanical existence. That's why the Bible and all spiritual teachings say so often, wake up. It's easy to get lost in mechanical, negative thinking. It's not easy, though, to clean up some of the messes that we create when we're in those states. If we don't have right concentration, it's kind of like having a well-made bow and arrow and a target, and then forgetting the bow's function and using it for firewood when we get cold. In fact, the meaning of the word sin is an archery term, which in Greek means missing the mark. Another good child-rearing necessity is right speech. We talk about that a lot at Unity. Children are like parrots. They repeat our words, which represent thoughts, and thoughts end up creating our lives. So words are very, very important. That they shape our attitude, which then creates our world. That's why Unity believes so strongly in affirmative affirmations. If you hear yourself uttering words of negativity, fear, hopelessness, judgment, or depression, delete them. Just hit the delete button like you would on a computer and pray to see things differently. Then there's right action. Right action is the cornerstone for building your inner spiritual home, for your Christ consciousness. Remember that you are the role model for your Christ child. If you are sincere and honest and giving and loving toward others, your subconscious will register this and think better of you and deem you more worthy of attracting your highest good. This is the kind of healthy environment that all children thrive in. You know the old adage, don't do as I say and not as I do, right? Well, that doesn't work. Any teacher or parent knows that. Children do what they see. When we act in more evolved, higher ways, we are creating an inner environment in which our higher self can thrive. Right action is vital to purifying our vessel. And remember, Jesus was born of a virgin. Virgin means purity. Metaphysically, this means that purity is a prerequisite to birthing our Christ consciousness. The Old Testament is replete with stories and commandments about how to live right and the suffering we endure when we don't live right. Some even interpret this as God's being vengeful. It's really just stories and commandments about avoiding suffering, karma, that we bring on ourselves when we aren't good moral people. God doesn't punish us. God doesn't punish anyone. Our defying laws, like those of psychology and physics, is what causes our suffering. Suffering is the result of actions, cause and effect. We suffer due to the karmic operations that we ourselves put into effect. It's kind of like walking across the I-10 at a busy time of the day. God doesn't punish us for doing that, but we are probably going to suffer being hit due to the law of physics that says that two solid objects can't occupy the same place at the same time. The Old Testament is about purification so that we can be moral, good people. If everyone lives according to the Ten Commandments, we'll also have a good moral society in which to live and enjoy our lives. And being good people is very important for the process of purification. The New Testament, however, is more about what's possible after we purify ourselves. Through right action, we metaphysically create a pure vessel, Virgin Mary vessel, if you will, in which the Christ consciousness in us can be born. We are no longer just moral, law-abiding people. We can start evolving into something much bigger, higher, our Christ self. Charles Fillmore, Unity co-founder, tells us that this self has atom-smashing power to manifest what ordinary people call miracles. This is where our spiritual life really takes off. We go far beyond just being good people who live right and thus avoid many of life's pitfalls. Through purification and birthing this Christ in us, we birth a whole new reality. And that is what we're talking about today, allowing our Christ consciousness to fully and consistently manifest in all of its possibilities. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore said that such things as physical healings and permanent states of joy and peace and abundance are normal manifestations for those whose consciousness is on that level. Jesus, Buddha, and all spiritual masters have said the same thing. Basically, life is in divine order. We just have to get with that order. And lastly, as with caring for any new child, we must accept that it's not a once-a-week, 20-minute-a-day project. If you leave babies in their cribs alone most of the time, they'll sprout according to their physical DNA, but they'll be a mess. They need your constant care, nurturing, and attention. When we commit to truly living spiritual lives, it means our spiritual being permeates every every word and every action. And the result is that we thrive and our lives work. Rowboat and sailboat sailors can have moments of peace and happiness when all goes well in life and the winds and currents are favorable. But steamboat spiritual sailors aren't dependent on outer circumstances. They create their circumstances. They go forward surely and steadily, no matter what the outer conditions of the world are, even in spite of what their thoughts and emotions are. Jesus said, "I have come that ye shall have life and have it more abundantly." All spiritual masters have taught that. It takes a little work to unlearn bad habits that cause us unhappiness and suffering. But as anyone in AA can tell us, addiction to old habits may not be easy to let go of, but the rewards are great. Unity is about practical spirituality, and it's practical to raise our Christ consciousness child well. It can provide us with undreamed of happiness, as any parent of a well-adjusted child can tell you. And one magnificent perk that I've found is the play dates. The play dates with others who are raising their inner Christ child. When we commit to living a truly spiritual life, we soon find ourselves in the company of others doing the same thing. And those are the people I love spending all my time with. So while you are raising your inner Christ and finding ways to ensure it's blooming in your life, share your child-rearing stories with others on your spiritual path at Unity and elsewhere. Remember, if you stumble and fall, you aren't alone. You are tied to others who are trekking up the Himalayas of the soul with you, and they will pull you back up. You don't have to make this journey alone. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Remember that. Check in with others on your spiritual path regularly. No one said child rearing was easy, but it will be the most rewarding experience of your life. And nothing is more fulfilling than seeing your little inner Christ child take its first steps in the outer world, thus manifesting goodness, purity, love, and power in your life. You have a lot to look forward to. Thank you.